Wave.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Time, a Wave original. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Subscribe, like, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars. I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. This is our 3rd episode in our series looking back on 10 years since Colin Kaepernick sat by the water cooler during the national anthem. Like, sometimes we forget that that's exactly how it went, but that was the thing. So we have talked already to Charles McDonald about Kaepernick, the player. We talked with Jason Goff about the year 2016. And then the next stage of this process, 2017 to 2019, we will talk to our good buddy, the author of this here book that remains on my desk for every time that he comes on, Kings and Pawns. Check it out. Still available in stores. Is it Howard Bryant is the soft kind out yet?
Next year.
Next year. Okay. So then you'll be able to like put it places and bend that bitch up. You know what I'm saying? You ain't just gotta, it ain't just gonna be a concussive situation.
Right. I've been watching people. I'm like, man, y'all treat books badly.
Yo, I am so kindled out just to save the space.
Really?
Yeah, like I need to start doing the thing where instead of buying on the Kindle, I rent on the Kindle and then buy the ones that I like really want to keep.
I went backwards. I started buying books, hardcover books. I started to buy everything again. Removable media. I'm tired of everybody having my password. I'm tired of the fact that I can't get rid of my Yahoo ID because all my movies and whatnot on Apple are tied to it, and my books are tied to it. I'm like, yeah, I buy my movies now. I bought a DVD player. I bought a Blu-ray player. Wow. I went back. I've gone back to the future.
No, I'm here for physical media. I'm just not here for looking around all these books. Like that's the thing. Like when it's time for me to travel, I'll knock out 2, 3, 4 books.
For real.
I'm also all about Captain Carry-On. So anyway, we will get back to all of those things. But first, I broke this up time-wise to start this at 2017 because I think it's interesting that, like with golf, I talked about stuff like, you know, do you remember where you were when you heard this happen, right? And when you first got the statement from Kaepernick, which I think was important because what differentiates Kaepernick from just about everybody was the clear articulation of what it was that he was protesting with no punches pulled, where you had guys like Marshawn Lynch, for example, who when 2017 comes around is a guy who does not take a knee. He just sits by the water cooler, but he never answered a question about it. And now Marshawn Lynch, of all people, has all the money coming in from all of the places, right? But to me, and you tell me if I'm wrong here, we got through the 2016 season, 2017 comes, and the first thing that we start with is, hey, nobody's giving this guy a job, right? Yeah. Like after a season where he demonstrated, if nothing else, that he was a capable NFL quarterback. Not one person, not one team was like, hey, why don't we bring that guy
in? In a sport that is quarterback deprived.
Yes.
I mean, that to me was the interesting thing because what I remember most about that time period, if we're talking 2017.
Yes.
The first thing was the minute the season was over, it was done, right? I think it was January. They immediately released him and said that they released him early to give him a chance to go find a market. There was no market. Then things began to coalesce around secondary narratives, which was, well, he was never a starter anyway. And then suddenly the pile on that he was not a good player and that this should not be a surprise that he doesn't have a job because he's not a good player. That to me was one of the big things because you could see the industry was coalescing around something. And, you know, and when that happens, I'm not all conspiracy theory on it, but there's absolutely a conspiracy going on here. It was like the league was not going to sign him. And then when you start having owners talk about how they couldn't, anger their fan bases, you knew that this conversation about Kaepernick was taking place at a much higher level than football operations. This was taking place at a league level, at an ownership level. And that was happening at the exact same time that you have an inauguration. Donald Trump's now the president. And on top of that, you still have him not speaking. So there's obviously a strategy taking place both on his side and on the league side, and then obviously with what's happening nationally, that is creating this sort of perfect storm for what's about to happen, which is the clear articulation by the time you get to training camp and the draft and everything else that he's not going to have a job.
Yeah. Like, I think it is an important distinction between 2016 and 2017 and, now that we're 10 years removed from that election, there will be young people who will never believe this, but like, we didn't think Trump was going to win. Like, it was the first legitimate upset in a presidential election since the year 1948, right? Where it was just like, wait a minute, what? We thought like at this point with the technology and the polling and everything else, we got a pretty good idea how these things are going to go going into it. Like even the black dude, we knew he was going to win both times going in that. Trump was a massive upset. So we had everything that happened with Colin in 2016, but the backdrop was not, and now Trump is emerging, right? That didn't happen. Once you got to 2017, the backdrop on everything was Trump. And you had a non-insignificant number of people who looked at the situation and was like, okay, well, look, Trump's the president now. Now everything is going to be different, which I admit that I didn't really think, right? Like I had always felt like this game is set up to a degree where no one person can it's designed to prevent like seismic change. Like the point is to induce some level of gradual change. And what did change though very quickly, I don't even know if it really changed, but the backdrop of the country felt totally different. And then you're right. It was suddenly we're going to let Colin get out here and so he can hurry up and he can find a job. And then nobody wanted to give him this job. And then it felt in a way, because I'm not conspiratorial too much either. But do you remember when the game decided to destroy Public Enemy?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
After... Oh, yeah, with Professor Griff?
Yeah, but it was a gradual process. But it is the one, like, actual factual, like, conspiracy I feel like actually took place. Now, Professor Griff got out here wilding.
He did.
I believe the quote was that the Jews are responsible for 70% of the wickedness of the world. I don't know how you calculate this number.
I love the 70% number.
Yeah, he basically said Jews are like water. Like, I don't know how he determined that 70% was it. But Chuck had to figure out how to handle that. Did not go so well. They fired Professor Griff, everything else. But what I remember is as it went, when you got to like 93, 94, and gangster rap had come out, and PE had decided to take a stance that was critical of that. If you go back and read the reviews of the Music at Our Message album, which is actually not bad, you go back and read the reviews of that, it was savage and it was unyielding and it was across the board. That it just seemed like whether it was the Village Voice or whether it was the Source, they were all just shitting on it like, nope, we're getting this out of here. This isn't, we're not doing this thing anymore. And the head of the snake is going to wind up being taken out. And you just, like, I tell you, go back and read it. You'll be like, wow, that all feels like really extreme. And with Colin, it was one thing that maybe you had some people try to make the argument that, he wasn't good enough to play. But it went so far where you had people making the argument that, well, the problem is nobody really runs the read option anymore. People run the read option to this day, right? Like people were saying things that were just actually factually incorrect when it seemed very obvious. Like you say, in a league where there aren't enough good quarterbacks to fill out the teams, let alone 3 quarterbacks on every team, right? A quarterback that had been to a Super Bowl, all of these things. Nope. Nowhere to be found on an NFL roster. Nowhere. And in fact, we didn't talk enough about the fact that Kyle Shanahan, a guy that could do the things Colin could do would probably be pretty helpful in the offense that he had. Nope. Not even thinking about it. They brought in Brian Hoyer.
And let's not forget, Miami gave Jay Cutler, what, $10 million?
Yeah.
And he played 5 games the year before. And so, I mean, it was anybody but him. Yeah, anybody but Colin. And that was very clear. And I think that with the other piece of that too, that was really interesting. And, when you think about the 10 years of it, the Public Enemy comp is a good one because at some point they'll remind you who you work for. And it doesn't make a difference. And a lot of times you'll see it obviously you'll see it in the Black industries a lot more. It'll be a lot more pronounced because they're going to need the Black talent to coalesce around this to protect itself. Because now what you're really talking about is you've got a fracture here that you can't just walk away from, right? Are you going to stick to what is taking place, or are you going to protect your money? Because when you have these fractures, the industry, the institution is going to rely on you to protect it. Otherwise, you'll be the one out of a job. And we saw that especially with the Black athletes, we saw the Black athletes immediately coalesce around the narrative that Colin had cost himself. Remember Michael Vick, of all people, Michael Vick was taking the high moral ground. Maybe he should get a haircut. Remember all that? Maybe he should just cut his hair and he should just fall in line. And then there was Ray Lewis, of all people, who had so much to say about Colin Kaepernick. And then the league let him say it. And so when that was happening, it was very obvious to me, at least, and obviously to a lot of other people, it wasn't rocket science, that if you were going to stay in this game, part of you staying in the game, part of your loyalty was to criticize Kaepernick, was to really sort of circle around him and make him and isolate him. And I don't even know sometimes if people know that they're doing this, if it's just the momentum that takes place. And certainly from a media standpoint, it takes place from a sourcing standpoint. Where are you getting your information?
Right.
Is your information original, or is your information simply repeating the people who want Colin Kaepernick to be out of a job? And I always wonder about this, Bo, and I always wondered about your thoughts about this. I don't think we've ever talked about this. Is the thought that I've always had is, how much do you think that those guys knew that this was going to be permanent? The Michael Vicks and the Ray Lewises and everybody else who had something to say. And let's not forget, Dak Prescott and all the other players, everybody, the whole power of the NFL and of professional sports in a lot of ways came down on one guy. That's not an accident. And everyone's got to take a little piece of that too.
Yeah,
or a big piece of it.
Yeah, like I say, that's where I say, for me, the PE comp comes in. It's like, damn, it's raining from everywhere. Like,
that's right.
It's like the Apocalypse 91 album was the 2016 season. Like, okay, we're still letting this go a little bit, right? Then it was like, nah. We've had enough. And to me, in it all coming down in that way, I think it leads to a point that I think is very important, which is, if it was just about business, then you didn't need that. Because if it was about business and you're making the argument that you are responding to what the fans are going to do, then you don't need to sell the fans on how they already feel, right? Like, they get to speak on it, and then it goes from there. The truth is, people will watch this goddamn football no matter what. And by the way, if you need an example of that, all the people that said that they would quit watching football because of Kaepernick, who went back to watching football, right?
Immediately.
It be calling me, right? Like, people cannot stop themselves from going back into watching it. So when they made that argument, it was just like, no, well, I just don't think the fans are going to show up, right? It's the same argument behind the Washington Commanders. We can't change the name from Redskins to that because the fans want it. You can't name one person. Or maybe you can name one or two, but not enough that actually matter. The reason they stopped watching them is because they were fucking sorry. It wasn't because of the name of the team. But all those arguments came down. No, none of them.
And from where, though? That's the piece of it that always gets me, is the way that this whole industry sort of knows how to get in line. So much for the independent press and the independent thought. And now we know everybody in the network is going to line up because we know where the checks are coming from.
Right.
But we also know where the sentiment is going to come from outside of the game, because anybody who wants to get inside the game is going to have the right attitude.
Right.
And I think one of the things about this, when we were talking about coming on this program, this show, to talk about this specifically, one thing that had always been hitting me for a while now was not just about Kaepernick, not about what Colin did or what Colin didn't do. And we've spent a lot of time talking about that, but how well organized his opposition grew over the next several years. From 2017 on, it wasn't just, what Colin did or what Colin didn't do. It was, how now the IOC is not going to allow kneeling. Like the whole sports industry had a response to this. Right. That's really, to me, when I think about the legacy of Colin Kaepernick, I don't really think about Cap necessarily. I think about how quickly his opposition mobilized to crush protest for the next several years. And by the way, that's still ongoing.
Yeah. Like they had a plan to crush him when it is clear that he did not have a plan on this in the first place. Right. And I do not say that as a judgment of him. I don't think he thought this was really going to be that big of a deal. And then it mushroomed into everything that it was. But like even the idea or the act of kneeling, it became this very powerful statement to the point where people forget that isn't even how it began in the first place, to the point where the kneeling came to then, we both know this. Once you put something into the world, it no longer belongs to you. It becomes whatever it becomes. And that shit became whatever people needed it to be, right? Whatever it was, it became just the act of defiance. And it's crazy to think that not standing up for a song could be like the most defiant thing that one could consider that you were doing. But it became that impactful because people saw the reaction and how strong it was, and also a certain measure of courage that it took for him to stand. And the reason it took that courage for him to stand is that suddenly everybody saw.
That's right. And it was also the articulation, as you said, to start this. It wasn't just, he wasn't out there saying, hey, give peace a chance. He was like, no, you are attacking Black people. You're not attacking protesters. You're not pro Greenpeace. We're not talking about climate. We're talking specifically about Black people. And that is what inflames a lot of this, or if not all of it, because one of the arguments that I've always tried to make on this is that if Cap was like, no, I'm just here for world peace, man, just the world is a messed up place. No, it was the specific articulation. Specific. No, I am here because your police are killing us. That's the fight right there. That's the gasoline. That's the wick. That's the kindling. That's the whole thing. I mean, and there's no way around that, because that's what inflames the anger. That's why people get so upset. That's why this turned into what it turned into. And especially because it was police as well. Like the articulation of what Colin did. The one thing I will say about whether he had a plan, whether he had a strategy, whether he didn't, whatever you want to say, the one thing he did say was that the articulation of why he was doing it could not have been clearer.
Right. And that is, there's nothing more powerful in those moments, in those times, as clarity. And again, it was very clear that the decision had been made. We're just shutting this down.
Yeah.
Right. Like we've decided that this, of all the things that surround this league, this is the thing that we're just not going for. Right.
Well, that's why the Ray Lewis piece was so fascinating. And that was why, the Michael Vick piece was so fascinating, because what it told me was that we can handle all the stuff that you all do to each other, but this guy's messing with our money.
Yeah.
And this guy's affecting us. And this guy is affecting the way that, not only the way that we see labor, because let's not forget, this is a labor issue. Every battle that was taking place on the political front was taking place in triplicate between the Players Association and the league, in terms of power, in terms of, this is where this whole player empowerment, athlete activism, where all this language came from. And what I found most offensive about it was Ray Lewis's Hall of Fame speech. When he was up there and they were all laughing and clapping and Ray was doing his sermon. And this is all happening at a time when Colin Kaepernick is out of a job. And I sat there and I'm watching that speech and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, they are completely comfortable with you because you reinforce what they think of us, you know? And they'll accept, you'll pay your penalty for the dog fighting, and then, whatever went down in Atlanta with Ray Lewis and all of those things. But when you show a level of intellect and you show a level of history and knowledge and concern for an understanding of where we are as people, as a people, they destroyed you. And, that to me was the first thing that was really the most, and the number of the players that went along with it. And then, of course, I don't know if we're going too quickly ahead of time, but then you immediately get into labor, because now you've got the Kaepernick faction on one side and you've got the players coalition on the other, this, NFL owner-led movement. Once again, all rooted around money and very little of it around principle. And then it comes down to the leadership and whole thing about, okay, is it possible to have a movement? Can we do this? And how close to the breast do you want to stay, players? And so to me, like, all of this did a certain level of exposure. It exposed the players as, still just being employees. They're still just little boys with big muscles who sell products. And it also exposed the question of movements in general. Can you be part of something like the NFL and maintain any sort of independence? Probably not. And then, of course, the third thing is, when everyone was talking about empowerment, how much power do you have if you lose everything by opening your mouth?
Right. Well, and it also, I think, got to the power of narrative, in the sense that a major difference between Colin Kaepernick and Michael Vick is that there was a path to redemption for Vick. There was a path to redemption for Ray Lewis. There was no path to redemption for Kaepernick because he didn't do anything wrong.
That's exactly right.
Right?
And
like, there's nothing, there's no way for him, or no realistic
What's he saying sorry for? What do I need to be redeemed for?
Yeah, there's no way he was going to turn this around in a way.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, white folks going to be like, I think he's learned from what happened, that's like there was nothing to turn it around, and people who feel like that he did something wrong, you're never going to get that out of him, right? And so unless he was going to become an entirely different person, or like shorten the Muhammad Ali arc and progression, right? Where if Muhammad Ali endorsed Ronald Reagan in 1984, but imagine if Muhammad Ali had endorsed Richard Nixon in 1972. That was basically what it would have taken for Kaepernick to have brought this thing all the way back around. It was like, no, there was nothing that had been done wrong. There was nothing he could do to change those people's minds about him. And I think a very important point, and we're going to get to this a little bit, and you talked about this also, is the fact that he didn't ask for permission to do what he did, right? To make the statement that he made. It was entirely him. Just one day deciding, you know what? I'm not giving up my seat. I am going to stay right here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think that is the thing where, what was he supposed to do in terms of forgiveness? Forgiveness for what?
Right.
Right. I mean, that is and every time you get to this piece when it comes to him, that's the question you have to answer. Well, I just think he's handled it the wrong way. Do you?
Right.
Do you think he's handled it the wrong way? All these people who would wear those T-shirts. I'd be walking around the airport and you'd see all these, white dudes with their T-shirts, stand for the flag, kneel for the cross. Okay. All right. And these are the same guys who stormed the Capitol.
Yep.
I think there's another way to do it. And I think, to me, and obviously this is just my own thoughts, but that combination is what killed any idea of athlete activism or player protest or any of it, because those dudes did nothing. The athlete response to January 6th was non-existent. And that was the slap in the face to everything that they had said about the players who were quiet for 60 seconds. And all these dudes who were like Blue Lives Matter, and policemen got killed on January 6th, and they tried to say it wasn't even a riot. And the players didn't say a goddamn thing. Nothing.
Yeah.
And that to me is, there was one sentence that really hit me when that was all happening, which was, they're telling us this is theirs. All of this belongs to them. It's the difference between renters and owners. How are these very same people who were going bananas 5 years ago about a CVS being on fire in Baltimore saying nothing about this? And the difference is that you can't have an insurrection on your own property. They believe this is theirs. The CVS didn't belong to the community in Ferguson or Baltimore, whichever CVS we're talking about. But the Capitol is white people like, well, this is ours anyway. How can we can't have a riot on our own property? And the ball players didn't say anything. And that includes the basketball players, that includes the WNBA, that includes all of them. And they hadn't been heard from since.
Well, coming up next, I want to talk about that element and how the Trump of it all came up in 2017 to help lead us to where we are now. Look, if your supplement shelf needs a reset, now's the time. GNC's semi-annual Live Well sale is happening August 13th through August 26th with BOGO 50% off almost everything. Whether you're restocking your protein and creatine, grabbing your everyday essentials, or finally trying something new, this is the moment to build a routine that works for you. From protein and creatine to hydration and energy essentials, you can find the pieces to keep your routine moving. It only happens twice a year, so don't miss the chance to stock up, save, and get ready for what's next. Don't wait. The sale won't last long. Shop at gnc.com/sale. All right, we are back with Howard Bryant. So the most 2017 thing to happen, I feel like maybe in all the 2017 things to happen, is when Trump came out.
I think you're going to go?
When Trump came out and called the football players sons of bitches. Right? What is that, a rally? He was just up there and he was like, oh, yeah, fire the sons of bitches.
Was he like in Alabama, wasn't he? In Tuscaloosa or somewhere in there?
Yeah, what responsibility. He's talking about Kevin. He said he needed to just, if the guys were going to protest during the national anthem, he said to fire the sons of bitches. And that was the thing. That got the football players riled up. That had Rex Ryan, who in 2016 was on stage at a Trump rally, sitting on ESPN being like, hey, wait a minute, this isn't what I signed up for. I thought it was going to be this, then the third. Now he's talking bad about football players. God damn, that was the line for you. But that was like the line for America, it felt like. That made this the giant sports story. And it also led to the first time, at least to me, that you saw a widespread support, at least for the spirit of what Kaepernick was doing. Because as somebody once told me, you have to understand that the NFL Players Association is maybe the largest group of black conservatives in America. That is not a revolutionary bunch of dudes. It is not a
great line.
Yeah, it's not a culture that spawns a lot of individualism. It is very top down. It is very much influenced by white evangelicism. Like, there are a lot of these things.
And also desperation.
Yes, right.
Because they don't control their money.
Correct. And they know that, and their money isn't even guaranteed. But Trump called them sons of bitches. And now next thing you know, they kneeling all over the place. You got cats throwing up fists. You got dudes doing all the things. Why were they doing them? It's a great question that doesn't necessarily have the clearest answer. But
I actually think it does. I mean, I think it has a very clear answer. I mean, because it's one thing when you're attacking the players. It's another thing when you're attacking the workforce, labor. I got Jerry Jones is taking a knee with the players on the sidelines. Jerry Jones, who came out and said that he would release any player who protested on his team.
Mm-hmm.
They realized that this went from a political problem to a workforce problem.
Yeah. And the reason I say what they were doing was not necessarily clear is, as we discussed before, everybody had their own explanation.
They had their own reasons.
Yeah, for whatever it is they were doing. That Jerry Jones thing is interesting, though, because in a way that almost foreshadows a lot of things in 2020, where all of a sudden they looked up and they're like, shit, man, these dudes are mad. We just got to get through this week or two or something like that. But these dudes are mad. But when Jerry Jones went out there with his team and locked arms with them and took a knee before the national anthem, that is one of the most amazing, I don't even know what the word is to use, type situations. Because Jerry, to be fair to him, I always felt like Jerry was in a bit of a bind. Jerry knows that he got more black fans than anybody else. Jerry knows he got more white fans than anybody else too, right? Jerry knows this national anthem shit is bad for business.
Bad for business.
Jerry also knows these dudes can kind of shut this whole thing down if they all decide to. And I like that my players like me.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do? And he threaded that needle so precisely in that.
And also perfectly.
Yes.
Because if there's one thing, like when I think about black people, especially professional athletes, because you have to add the money to it. Like they can check in and check out whenever they want because a lot of them are really, really rich.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't know how you spend your money is up to you, but how much money you have is a lot of times not in dispute. And so I always refer to us in a lot of ways as sort of crumbs for a starving people. All we need is the gesture. And then that just calms us down. Just show us that you love us. Just let us know that you care about us. And Jerry is Eddie DeBartolo times 500 in terms of how he lets his players. I mean, like in the Cowboys doc on Netflix, which I thought was very, very good. The number of players, Jerry knows how to tap into his players. They love Jerry. That's why the Players Association, that's why they can't strike. Because them players, they love the owners more than they love each other. Because of the history of it all. And also because they know who signs the checks and they know, once again, and how many owners do you have? How many bosses do you have that if something goes down and you end up in the clink, you can call him first?
Right. You could call Jerry.
You could call Jerry. And those guys swear by him. And he's the face of the league, like it or not. I don't care if they haven't been to the Super Bowl in 31 years. Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys is the NFL. And in terms of how they handle players, in terms of how they operate, in terms of the aspiration, all of it. And the fact that what went down when Trump did that, when he gave that speech about getting, fire the sons of bitches and the whole thing, the one thing that all professional sports need to do is break the union. Either physically break them or spiritually break them. And the NFL Players Association has been spiritually broken since 87. Right? And they've been trying to get something back since 87, when 40% of the damn league crossed the picket line in the first 3 weeks and killed the strike. And superstars were the ones to cross. And why did they cross? They crossed, as we did on this program, they crossed because they loved their owners. 49ers weren't crossing, they loved Eddie D. Right? And so this was the first time where Jerry was like, wait a minute. We've spent 30 years keeping these guys in the exact perfect place. Why are you going to fire them up? You actually gave them a reason to join together, to be bonded. That's the biggest threat in the sport. There's no bigger threat in the sport. No sport is more exploitative, is more restrictive, is more owner-friendly than football. And you're going to give these guys a reason to essentially really be a union, to be unified? We got to put this down right here, right now.
And while all this is happening, by the way, where is Colin Kaepernick? Not playing football.
Not playing.
And by now, not really talking.
And not talking. And I've always felt that was the biggest tactical mistake. And Colin did what Colin did because Colin felt like doing whatever he felt like doing. It's his life, it's his decision. It's his strategy or lack thereof. And I've told him this, that I never felt letting other people define you as the right call. Even if you're not a great public speaker or whatever, I mean, Colin can bring it when he wants to bring it. And, but I felt like that was a huge tactical error because they got to speak for him for an extended period of time. And I'm not just talking about the owners, I'm talking about his ex-teammates and his competitors and all the, everybody's got something to say about Colin.
And even his allies.
And that's what I'm saying, even his allies. Everybody is speaking for him. And I don't ever think it's a great policy to have the entire world speaking for you. And that was the thing about that weekend as well, was that in the backdrop of all of this, two things are happening. One, Colin's not playing. That's the first thing. And that's what this is really all about. I mean, no disrespect to Eric Reed or to the McCourtys or, Antonio Cromartie, everybody who was in it, or the Bennetts, all of them. But this was really about Kaepernick from an ownership standpoint. That's the first thing. The second thing that's going on during that time is that the league is effectively crushing the protest by offering them money. You've got Anquan Bolden out there, and you've got Malcolm Jenkins, and you've got the McCourtys with Bob Kraft. You've got them all saying, okay, we will partner with you on social justice initiatives. We are essentially going to take a big ass fire hose to this protest and pour water on it, and we're going to co-opt it. We're going to bring you in. And now you got prison reform stuff going on. You've got legislation. You've got all of a sudden, you've got all of these athletes now standing side by side at state houses talking about real change.
Meaningful change. That's what
meaningful change. And then you had Dak Prescott out there going, well, I'm all about real change, which is a shot directly at Kaepernick. Like, I'm not, and that was the other narrative that we heard. What was the phrase we were hearing that whole year? Well, you can't just take a knee. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can, because if there's one thing that we know about this world, bodies in the streets change the world. Right? You can hit like on Facebook all you want. Go hop on CNN International. People are in the street. And that gets people's attention. And so the idea that you couldn't just take a knee was the players undermining themselves under the promise that the Terry Pagulas of the world are going to take care of you. The most paternalistic shit I'd ever heard.
While also not really addressing the basic idea that got us here, which is the idea that his song is that holy.
That's right. But you're not going to win that battle, right? You weren't going to win that.
Right. You're not going to win it. But I do think as more and more goes, it is worth it every now and then, right, to bring attention back to the fundamental idea of what we're talking about, which is what you do when they play a song, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to 2017, and I think you mentioned this a little bit, I think this is an important thing to note, is that since Colin wasn't playing, these actions and things also became a bit jumbled because it started to raise the question about, so how important, if we started here by talking about the way that the police treated Black people, or just the way America treated Black people, now the front and center issue, rather than being that, becomes, does Colin Kaepernick have a job? Should Colin Kaepernick have a job? Right?
Well, that's right.
Now, that to me, I think is an interesting and maybe under-discussed complication of everything that we are discussing, just because now we're not really, like, we get into this, are you doing anything about meaningful change, and everything else, but we're not really talking about the issue anymore, which I think that Colin, especially through that 2016, did a fantastic job of bringing attention to the issue beyond just attention to him. Then it's funny, then once he was gone, the attention then went to him.
Well, that's right. And I think that's exactly what complicated things, because people were very complicated and they were ambivalent. A lot of the players weren't happy with Colin. Once it became personal, when you shift away from the issues, you really did have three issues here. You had one, what the police relationship with Black America was, which is an ongoing 50-year, 100, 200-year issue, right? Which is really where all this started. Then you had the secondary issue, which was the athlete's voice. Like, what can they actually do and say and affect, and how is that relationship going to work both with their employer, and then also how is it going to work with the public? But then you had this other thing as well. And this other thing was, once again, labor. You had a moment in time there where the Players Association had never really thought that this was part of its job, right? The Players Association job was to protect the safety of the players, to protect the working conditions of the players, to protect the economic situations of the players. And now they're being asked to do something. So they're being asked to move on the fly. And while they're being asked to move on the fly, you've got these rogue elements, whether it's Anquan Boldin or Malcolm Jenkins or Devin McCourty. They have individual relationships with their owners, which is undermining the strength of the unity of the union. All of this is happening within the backdrop of how we actually feel about Colin. Because once the issue shifts toward him not working, now a lot of people are like, well, what do you expect, right? Then it suddenly now it becomes a job issue, where it's like, well, you mess with your employer is going to mess back. And then I don't remember what year, it wasn't 2017, I think it was 2018, when he actually then sued the league. And then, of course, the response to then, because as you said, this is a very conservative group, a group that understands where its bread is buttered. How are you going to get a job if you sued your employer? You're finished, right? And so the lack of sympathy increased. And it's like, how can we ride with you? They weren't going to ride with them in the first place because, in 2016, when they were having these meetings about, hey, what are we going to do and how are we going to do this? And we had a lot of people who were really kind of excited about being active. Then the question came back to, okay, well, who's the leader? And when Colin didn't show, that was a role he was really into, and he was like, hey, man, everyone do what they're going to do. There were a lot of people who were like, hey, man, we said we were going to run up this hill behind you, and now you're not here. And so now if it's everybody for themselves, I'm protecting my paycheck. Because that's what I was saying earlier, Bo, about how the most important thing of this entire 10-year anniversary of Cap, what I take most from that was the chilling effect, was the way that everybody coalesced around making sure that none of y'all did this again.
Yep.
I mean, there are players that we can talk about who Antonio Cromartie didn't work again. Like, there are a lot of players who were like, yeah, I'm a pro athlete. I can speak, And in the NBA, it was a little different because LeBron was giving them all cover because he was LeBron. But if you don't have that sort of protection in your statistics on the back of your baseball card, on the back of your football card, you are very much exposed to losing your livelihood. And that is the huge piece of it, where a lot of the more shrewd players were sort of like, wait a minute, I know how this is going to go.
Yeah.
I can't afford, and it's not a bad question to ask, right? I mean, it's one of the things that you saw over the last couple of years on college campuses. People were asking professors to sign this and sign them. People are like, no, because I know where this is going to go. Does that make you a coward? Maybe. Do we need different strategies? Also. But does it also show the opposition, the power of the opposition that you're up against? Absolutely. No, absolutely. You're up against all of the full force of this country is coming up against you. And once you sign, or once you take a knee, or once you raise a fist and they throw you to the side, you'll get a 2-day news cycle, and then everybody will go back to loving the system.
Because the truth is, the difference between Colin and everybody else in the 2017 thing, this is a very important thing to note, is that the league basically gave people permission to do what they were going to do after the Sons of Bitches quote, right? Like, that's after right. That, the difference was Colin didn't ask nobody for permission. They managed
the protest.
Right, they did. Like, the only person that I could think of off the top of my head that I feel clearly suffered some consequences based on their participation in some form of protest was Marcus Peters when the Chiefs got rid of him and the money that he never really got. Eric Reed is a bit more of a complicated case to me because, quite honestly, he wasn't as good a football player as Marcus Peters was. That where their argument of, well, they were trying to move Reed from safety to linebacker, which is never a good sign. But at that point,
the other way around.
Yeah. But at that point, it was kind of like, when they said Colin wasn't good enough to play, that was ridiculous. But they started saying that about Eric Reed. It was like, I could kind of see the argument that you're making here. But Peters never got up to the money that you normally get for the production and things he did at cornerback. He could find teams that were willing to take him, but not necessarily teams that were willing to keep him. But the reason for that is not because the league wasn't punishing people as much as cats weren't trying them. Like, it reminds me when you get to the 2020 bubble and we all talked about how corny the slogans were on the back of the jerseys, and the people in the league will tell you we didn't turn anything down. That's what they came to us with. Like, it was self-regulated in that regard. What we did also get was the Players Coalition, which I think has actually been more interesting than I thought it would be at the time. Now, the issues with the coalition were obvious, most notably that the NFL had control of the board. Any money that the NFL was putting forth, the players had to match. So it wasn't, but I wound up, I think it was Torrey Smith that I was on the phone with, who talked to me when it happened. He was like, look, I hear everything that you're talking about, but he was like, this amount of money is more than they do for the salute to service, these things. Yep. And he really laid out what they thought was the case for a good deal that they had gotten from the NFL. And I will say that if you go through and look at the organizations that the Players Coalition supports, it reminds me of when NBC had the Richard Pryor show and they were running those episodes, but nobody at NBC had actually watched them. And then they did after 5 episodes and were like, what the fuck? Hey, man, get this off the air. What are you talking about? They are actually giving some money and supporting some organizations that are a little bit more radical than I am in some cases. Like one of those where they talk about destroying the whole criminal justice and prison system and everything else. And NFL money is going in that direction. They killed the protest, but if one were making the argument that meaningful change, quote unquote, was the thing, the Players Coalition has invested in organizations who do that, but you don't necessarily know about that, which shows the limitation of the idea that all there is to do is to, quote unquote, enact meaningful change, that there's power in the words, power that one could argue Kaepernick ceded by deciding that he wasn't going to talk anymore, power that the players ceded by making this trade with the Players Coalition, while also I think it's important to make note that the coalition, I think, has done better work than any of us thought that it would have going in.
Well, let's be very clear about this. You can't say that the Players Coalition did nothing.
Yeah.
Because to extract money from those owners in the first place was a real thing. To be able to articulate to people who, by the way, at the ballot box are giving money to ideas that they reject at the ballot box is a real thing in of itself. Now, maybe that's just the cost of doing business, and it's all a tax write-off when you're at Terry Pagula's at his dollar amount. But
Terry Pagula, who said we needed a black figurehead, who we will get to in the next episode, Jason.
And also, let's not forget, this was also happening at the same time where you had Bob McNair going, the inmates are running the asylum.
The prison.
The inmates are running the prison.
Yes.
Right? And so all of these things have to be put into consideration, have to be taken into context. And it all feels sort of quaint now because it does feel like a million years ago, but it wasn't. It wasn't that long ago. And I think that all of this is also in the backdrop of something else that we don't talk about nearly enough anymore, and that's 9/11. So all of this, so you've got this thing happening at the exact same time. You've got all these flags and flyovers and taking place. So the NFL field is its own sort of political battleground for how we view ourselves, and that. The Players Coalition, I think, I'm not going to say they get a bad rap because I feel like where I am most critical of them is simply, I feel like they could have gotten everything that they had gotten. I think they could have gotten that and 10 times more if they had stayed unified. I don't think that there was anything out there that they had gotten that they couldn't have gotten elsewhere. Right? I mean, do you really think that during that time period there wasn't corporate money out there for those big names? I mean, they could have, but the NFL money was the easiest money. You didn't have to go work that hard for it, and there was a there was a leverage that the players had because of what Trump had said. There was a feeling at the time that this is something that we should do, and so cost of doing business, and I'm sure they viewed it as a win-win. The players like, look, we're getting real money here, and when you're dealing with those athletes and most people in general, money is the barometer for everything. And it's the one tangible thing. They handed us $20 million. And that's a real thing. And that real money helps real people. So there's no argument there. To me, the issue had always been that they had allowed themselves to be splintered relatively cheaply. There's a bigger issue there, and that was of unity, which the Players Association has very rarely had when it's come to any kind of like organizing since '87.
Now, the last thing I want to get to that I actually somehow managed to lose track of, which is such a huge thing that you were yourself a part of. We fast forward to the year of our Lord 2019, right? And so we're looking 5 months or so before the world shuts down. Well, we have no idea that this is the direction that things are going to go in. And we're going to talk to Jason England about 2020 and beyond, because that's when all of this, I feel like, really comes to a head with or without Colin. But November 2019, we've had all this discussion about Colin not having a job. Colin has sued the NFL, a lawsuit that would later be settled. It is my understanding that Roger Goodell really, really was hoping that somebody would give Colin Kaepernick a job. That was his preference for a number of reasons. That this was not, when you say the NFL was keeping Colin out, it was not Park Avenue's idea to do this, but the 32 member franchises, they were their own situation. But a workout was scheduled for Colin Kaepernick for November 16th, 2019. And the teams are supposed to be there. I think Hugh Jackson was the one that they had
running
the workout.
16 Hugh Jackson.
That's right. It was supposed to be, because they need somebody to do this that could be somewhat like, he's a black dude that white people seem to like. You know what I mean? Like they thought they could get this whole
soldier. He's a good company man.
Yep. Somebody had to do this, right? He also, tried to get himself some looks, right? Trying to get back on. He's there. It is supposed to be at the facility in Flowery Branch, the Falcons facility. One Howard Bryant is in Atlanta for this.
Called you that day, didn't I?
You did, because you were on the road.
I was like, where am I?
Right, yeah. You were trying to figure out where you were going. I'm like, look, man, you going out to the north. I can't really help you on that. But the thing that happened was they tried to get Colin to sign some crazy waiver that basically said that if you do this, you can't ever sue us. And him in a T-shirt that said Kunta Kinte on it, which was quite a choice, I will just throw out there.
It's like sort of Prince putting slave on his cheek.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Not that I don't understand where you're coming from, my brother. I'm just not sure that is what I would have recommended that you do under these circumstances. But anyway, that workout, that workout got canceled, and then you had to fly all the way over to the south side to go to Charles Drew High School for another workout. Like, I remember talking to you on that day, but what was that day like, being in the midst of the store? By the way,
insanity.
While your employer didn't even know you were there, right?
That was the other thing. They didn't even know I was there. All of that was something. I was at the Apollo Theater. First time and only time I've ever been to the Apollo. I was there for a screening of Lynn Novick's film College Behind Bars on the Barred Prison Initiative. Lynn Novick, people don't know, is Ken Burns' business partner. They did all kinds of great films together. And my text messages are blowing up. There's a workout for Colin Kaepernick. I'm like, what? And it's in Atlanta, and it's in a couple days. And I'm like, so this is a real thing. So suddenly, here we go. Pack up, go down to Atlanta, go to Flowery Branch, sitting outside, and everybody's out there sort of waiting. And it was, once again, it was America for you. It was the 9 protesters out there honking their, showing how angry they are at the un-American Colin Kaepernick. And then on the other hand, there were the 18 pro-Kaepernick people out there. And in between, there was all kinds of noise going on between the sides. Is this actually going to happen? And that was the thing. Like, I was in contact with both the NFL and the Kaepernick team back and forth, because as the hours were going on, I'm like, okay, what teams are going to be here? And the teams actually weren't, like, the teams were not committing. They weren't giving us a list of who was actually going to be there. Then all of a sudden the list started to trickle out. And then you started to see, okay, who was actually going to be there? And it turns out it was like junior members of like every team, because it was on a Saturday and that's a scout day. And it was like, it's game day the next day. And so most of the executives aren't going to be there. I'm like, well, how serious is this if none of the actual talent evaluators are going to be there? But just the fact that it was happening was electric, because it seemed like maybe something was going to happen. And then as we start to get closer and closer to the time period that the workout's going to happen, they're still negotiating the terms. And I'm like, you guys still don't have terms? And so now things are starting to go south. It's like, all right, I think this whole thing's not going to happen. It's not, and everyone's standing there waiting, and you're seeing all the buses go in and all the cars and the check-ins to see which teams are there and which ones aren't. And what I found amazing about this was the utter lack of trust. That this was clearly an impromptu thing that somebody felt that they could jam in, and nobody was buying it. And that spoke to me mostly to just how divided or how divisive this issue had really become. Like, this is like, I wonder how history is going to treat this, if history is going to remember any of this at all, because we don't even have history anymore for the most part. But this is all one guy. This is Colin Kaepernick, and this is now year 3 of this, right? And by the time we are supposed to go, I get a text saying, workout's off. I'm like, the workout's off, came down here for nothing. And then I get another text 2 minutes later going, Colin's holding his own workout. Location TBD.
Yeah, and like all the rabble rousers have Voltroned it up to figure out how to switch this. It's a really impressive feat when you really stop and think about it.
From an organizing standpoint.
Yeah. Like the streets coalesced and decided, now we're going to figure this out.
Well, that was also the cool part about it, too, from just a protest standpoint. And all of Colin's fraternity brothers showed up. And that was kind of amazing to watch. Because you're not just talking about football. And you're not talking about a football player. You were really, really talking about the idea of power and of democracy and all these big highfalutin concepts that we talk about and that we take so easily. But what we're really talking about is the ability for a person to have some sort of agency over his life. And that was not taking place here. It was, Colin was going to be finished. And this was a glimmer of hope that maybe there was some resurrection here, that maybe there was some way that he was going to resume his career. And maybe, just maybe, the cooler heads were going to prevail and there wasn't going to be this great injustice. And then that Saturday hit and it killed everything. Because Hugh Jackson was like, man, fuck this dude. I mean, he was like, we have given everything we can for this. We're giving Colin an opportunity, and Colin essentially spit in our faces. And then Colin goes and holds his own event down at the high school. And that was interesting in of itself, because no one had seen him throw a football in 3 years. And so that was sort of fascinating in of itself. And so, but at the end of the day, when it all came down to it, you had these warring factions. You had the dueling factions of, the Kaepernick camp saying, none of this is real. You guys are trying to railroad me. You wanted my footage. It just became this negotiation. And on the NFL side, it was like, this dude's not really about it. He's not about it. Do you really want to be a professional football player? And I think
and also
that,
keep in mind by then that grievance has been filed, it has been settled, and one of the great mysteries that depends on who you talk to is how much money do we have
how much
here?
money did he actually get?
Yeah, like I don't know anybody. I know people who are very clear in their belief that it is up here and down here.
That's right.
I personally have no idea, but it has been settled by then. But there's animus. There's still animus.
And there's a lot of it. And I think that, to me, that was the end of it all. Because the NFL, I mean, and when I say the end of it all, what I'm really getting at, Bo, is what you had said at the start of the show, which was there was only one way that Colin was going to be able to escape the position that he was in, his stance, his feeling, and that was to undermine it. And that the NFL was making it very, very clear. If you want to be a part of the National Football Association, you got to play ball with us. Right? This is on our terms. It's our league. It's ours. It's not all of ours. It's ours, and we allow you to play in it. And I think that was the thing to me at that moment that really put the question of protest into really, really sort of clear and stark relief. Are you willing to lose everything for this? Like, that was where the Colin, I mean, if you just take all the different roads and what do they actually lead to? What they lead to is Colin Kaepernick was like, I don't really want to be part of this anymore, right? While at the same time, and it depends on who you talk to and what your own feelings are, at the same time, there's also this feeling that Colin never really knew the depth of how bad it was going to get. Did he ever really believe that it was going to come to this? When he sat by that water cooler and that preseason game, did he really believe that this was the beginning of the end of his professional life? And to me, that's the question that sits inside of him. You know what I mean? Because I don't think we'd ever really seen anything like it to that degree. And I still, to this day, I mean, I remember asking him, did you know that this was going to be a possible outcome when you started this? And he said yes. And I still don't know how deeply he believed that, because he was still a good player back then.
And then 7 months later, it all came to a head with George Floyd, which Colin wasn't involved in, but had everything to do with Colin. And the next episode, we are going to talk to Jason England about what happens after all of this, right? Like, once it's clear there's no more Colin Kaepernick career, how does the future affect him, everything else? That is how we'll wrap this up. But first, that's my man, Howard Bryant. This is Kings and Pawns. If you turn it on the back, it say extraordinary praise, because it's an extraordinary book that got extraordinary praise. Be sure to check this out. If you have not checked it out already, my brother, I appreciate you.
No, thank you.
All right, and ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here on The Right Time. We do this during the summer, every now and then. Mike McQuaid handling everything behind the scenes. Thank you, sir. Hit the voicemail line, 323-596-7767. Remember, follow The Right Time. Subscribe, like, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars. I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. And we'll talk to you guys in a couple of days. Take it easy.